One moment. I think that you need to give me the permission to share the screen because otherwise I can't do this.
Done.
All right. Okay, guys, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Right, so let's start this session. In today's session, we're going to review the concept of user stories as well as different types of user stories. And finally, we're going to take a look at the story mapping technique and dynamic that we use in Agile Teams. But first of all, I'd like to thank to all the organizers of this amazing event. This is an amazing opportunity for me to deliver my presentation, so I really appreciate that. A few words about myself. I'm a co-founder and faculty director at Flex Growth Group. We provide high-quality trainings on agile innovation and process improvement related topics. So I have more than 8 years of experience in the technology sector, and I hold various certifications, SPSM 1, 2, Safe Agilist, and many more. Okay, so let's start our talk about the user stories. I'd like to start with this quotation from Mike Cohn that says about that, in fact, it's important to write user stories. But nowadays, user stories are all about the conversations, right? So as it said here, this is it includes a written sentence or two, and more importantly, a series of conversations about the desired functionality. So you'll see a bit later in the presentation why it's so important to have conversations about the functionality rather than just writing it down. So a concept of the user story is this, that basically user story is all about who, what, and why of a product requirement. So we have a requirement, right? So, and we need to give it a form, right? So how we do that? Well, we're going to include who, then we're going to include what and why, because otherwise a requirement would be, it won't have any sense, I'd say. Okay. So, right, let's review some different types of user stories now. The first one and the most popular is a user-centered story, right? So, and here we can see a template you could use while writing it. So as a type of user, I want some goal so that some reason. And an example is this. As a marketing analyst, I want to see the Q1 2021 sales results metric visualized on the report so that I can make better decisions for Q2 2021. Okay, so in here we have the type of the user, which is a marketing analyst. So the goal here is to see the Q1 2021 sales results metric on the report, and so that the reason why the user would like to see these results, right, is that to make a better decision about what's going on next, right? Any question regarding this user-centered story? Okay. The next type is the enabler, right? So what's the enabler is? In fact, enabler is all about some technical actions, right? So this story will basically, we can treat it as a dependency, right? So I will do this story. After it's complete, we could start another one, which depends on this user story. Let's say we have user story A and user story B. So user story B depends on user story A. So we can't start working on the user story B until the A is complete, right? And also it could be about the some improvements in terms of the performance of the team. All right. So and we have an example here. So, and it says set up a new test line so we can reduce the regression runtime by 50%. Okay. So, and this is all about the right improving team performance. So this story is an example related to some performance, because otherwise if it's a dependency we'll just have some user stories, let's say user story A, and we could have in some place within this story some a comment that the user story B depends on that. Okay, any question about the enablers?
Hi, Pankuriya.
Hi
Hello.
there.
So that's the enabler. Is it similar to a spike that we create?
No, 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 no,
No, it
no, no.
isn't.
We'll speak about Spike
Okay.
later, right? So in this case, enable is all about the dependency. Spike is all about the investigation. So you investigate
Okay.
something, right? So you need to perform an investigation. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where you say, okay, so let's put a spike on our backlog. But
Okay.
enabler is all about managing dependencies, right? So if you have a dependency, as I said, between story A and story B, right? So story
Mm-hmm.
A, when it's complete, okay, we can start working on story B. Otherwise, it's impossible for us to start working on this story.
Right. Right. Thank you.
No problem. Right. So yeah, now we are going to talk about Spike. So Spike, well, as I mentioned, uh, is a type of user story that we use when we need to perform some technical or functional investigation or any type of research. Right. So an example would be do a research on how implementation of no SQL database, Hadoop, etc., would improve overall application performance. Okay, so um, currently, as we are reading this spike, we do not know if it improves or not the overall application performance. So, and we're not sure about that. So, the best way to do that, to find out whether it's true or not, is to do a research or investigation. Okay, so the team would set up some time to perform this investigation and then come up with some results. Okay, so another example could be, someone in the team says that it's good to have to maybe switch to some other, I don't know, JavaScript framework, and the rest of the team says, okay, that's fine, but let's see if it worth it, because if it's not, well, there's no reason to do that. So, and the team member would say, okay, I'm going to perform some investigation, I'm going to present some results, some maybe numbers, etc., to convince you that this particular framework is better than the current we're using now. Okay, so this is basically what the spike is. Any questions about spike? All right.
Hi, I have got one question. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So generally, like we have a different types like spike and a story, but you just mentioned the enabler. So enabler is kind of a, I mean, we have to internally identify that it can be enabler because when we
Mm-hmm.
raise a
Yes.
user story, it's
Mm-hmm.
like story or the spike, right? Am I right? In that scenario?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Yes. So yes, what you need to do, you need to identify the dependencies, right? So when you identify the dependencies, you would be able, let's say, you'd be able to easily identify what's the enabler and what's not, right? So it could be some separate user story with no dependencies at all. That's okay. Most likely it would be some user-centered story. Yeah, but at the same time, if this story, if from this story depends some other functionality that can be done without this particular story, in this case, the story becomes an enabler.
Sure, sure. Thank you very much.
No problem. Okay, guys. Now, we have another concept that is called the 3 C's, right? So when we talk about user stories, we say that in fact, and it should contain, the 3 C. So what these 3 C's are. So the first one is the card. So it should be short, right? And the card could be physical or virtual. So no problem with this. Then the most important thing is the conversation, right? So we need to ask questions in order to understand the user story better, right? So we will see it a bit later in the presentation. And the last one is the confirmation. And the confirmation is the acceptance criteria for the user story, because it's absolutely essential, because without acceptance criteria we can't say, okay, so we're going to perform some work on this story, but how do we know that the story is accepted by the customer? No way to do that until we have the acceptance criteria in place. And that's where the product owner should work with the stakeholders in order to identify these acceptance criteria. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay. Now, let's review what are characteristics of a good story, right? So the story ideally should be independent. Why I say ideally? Because as I said, most of the projects have many dependencies within the same project, right? So, and it could be really complicated to maintain all these stories independent, right? So most likely you would have a lot of dependencies within the project, and that's why it would be complicated, and it's kind of a challenge to manage these dependencies appropriately. But ideally, the story should be independent enough to be reviewed, as a separate entity. Now, the next characteristic is that the user story should be negotiable. Why is that? Well, because it's not a hard contract between the stakeholders and the team. And we need to work, with the customers to understand better what's the requirement, right? So, and, in many ways, we can see that the user story, the initial user story could evolutionate. It will change during the project because initially it's been written with no details, etc. So it's negotiable anyway, because you need to always understand what are the requirements, right? So what's the exact functionality the customer needs. After that, the next one is that it should be valuable. Okay, so the customer should see value in this user story, in this functionality, because we can't do that, delivering something that is not valuable for our customers. After that, it should be estimable, because if it's impossible to estimate a user story, well, it will be complicated to work on this story, right? So it should be estimable. After that, it should be small enough. And these two, estimable and small, in fact, they are, there is a dependency between this, because a small user story is usually one that is easier to estimate, but not necessarily, because, if there's lack of, some clarifications on the story, we need to do that anyway, involving the customer to understand what's going on. Okay, and the last characteristic is that it should be testable, because how do you know that the story is complete and the functionality works as expected? You need to test it, right? So it should be testable. Any questions about these characteristics? Okay. Now let's review, let's compare a bad user story with the good user story, right? So here we can see in this example, a bad example, right? So this story is unrefined. And here we can see some refined user story, right? So here it says just create new user. And this is okay. I mean, this is okay to put it on the product backlog. But anyway, we need to refine it later, right? So the team is unable to start working on this story because we do not know much about that, right? So it's just create new user, but what is that? How should it be done? And if we take a look at this example, we can see that the story has been refined, and now we can see some better definitions on this card, right? So, and we can read it. So as a new user of the application, I want to create a new account so that I can access to the application. Okay, well, that's fine. So we have the user, we have who, we have what, and we have the reason. That's fine. And after that, we have acceptance criteria. So landing page to register new user fields should be username and password. And the second acceptance criteria is the new user should be correctly created and retrieved from the database to access the application. That's fine. That's reasonable. And we can see that this user story has been estimated by the team as 5 points. Okay, so the team, had a conversation on this story, and they say, okay, so we need to review some front-end work, some back-end work to connect front-end with the database, and so on. So that's why this is for us 5 points. Okay, so that's it. Any questions about this slide? Okay. Next, after we have all our stories in place, imagine that, we need to work on our product backlog. And there's something that is called deep, right? So deep means detailed, appropriately estimated, emergent, and prioritized. So these are all the characteristics of a good product backlog, because we need to have some detailed requirements on the backlog, some detailed user stories, as we saw on this slide, you see, so with more details in it. So it should be estimated. Again, we saw that here we have some estimation points. Well, and the backlog should be emergent, right? Why is that? Because in its nature, the product backlog is dynamic. It's never complete, right? So it evolves over time as we have some new requirements from the customers we need to detect, we need to document, and we need to place it to the product backlog, right? And it should be prioritized. Why is that? Well, because we have some high priority items, we have some low priority items, and as the team wants to maximize the value delivered, well, we need to work on some high priority items first, and only after that, when we have all our high priority items, which I can see is something not really real, because there will be always some high priority items in the backlog. Well, and we need to manage our time appropriately to work on some medium to low product backlog items. Any questions about these characteristics of the product backlog? Okay. Now let's review the story mapping technique. Okay. Well, story mapping First of all, I'd like to give you some more details on why we should use this, right? So first of all, it helps us to identify some high business value for our product, right? Doing that, we also making sure that we create some delightful user experience for the customer, right? And this technique also enables us to prioritize our work and improve our understanding of what the customer wants from our product. Okay. Now I'm going to show you some demo of this technique. Can you see it now? Can you see this story mapping canvas?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, fantastic. So let's review what we've got here. So here we've got some functionalities, right? Some big pieces of functionalities. And here it's all about hotel reservation management application. Okay. And so we can see here, let's review it a bit closer. Let's take a closer look. So we have user management functionalities, we have book room functionalities, and we have change reservation functionalities, right? In this case, here, these yellow cards are all about some big pieces of functionality. So it's about register. In case of user management, it's about register, login, update preference. Now, to book a room, we have also some larger functionalities that are search for room, view room info, book room. And finally, we have the change reservation, where we've got view reservation, change reservation, and cancel reservation. Okay, this functionality is, if we take a look at the complete flow, we would see that, it's not that easy. It was, so the same example. Here we have some unrefined user stories. Okay, but that's okay for story mapping. That's okay because here we need to take a look at the big picture, right? So we need to prioritize properly. And if we can see, if we can see, so let's take a look, for example, update preferences, for example, right? So this functionality, if we take a look down, we can see some breakdown structure of this functionality. So we have some smaller pieces, right? And here we have the releases, right? So horizontal lines represents the amount of the releases we have. Right, so we have release 1, release 2, and release 3, and we have something that will stay on the backlog for now at least, okay? So, and if we take a look at the update preferences, for example, right? So we have that, there's no important stuff to work on release 1, right? And on the release 2, we're going to work on the update name and email, add payment information, and upload profile image is not on the release for now, so it stays on the backlog. Okay, and here, for example, right, so to book a room, right, during the first release, we're going to add credit card form. Then on the second release, we're going to implement PayPal and then Google Checkout. So, and we have some cards that stay on the backlog for now. So book room through Expedia.com and book room through Kayak.com. Okay. Now, I'd like to ask you if you have any questions or you'd like to review some more things. Do you have any questions about this canvas?
You're good. Nothing in the chat.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah, basically there's no questions. Well, in fact, what we can see is that we can see that here the user stories are prioritized accordingly to our release plan. Okay, so we have a lot of stuff to deliver during the first release, right? So, and supposedly these items are the most important for our customers at the time, right? Then we have release number 2, then we have release number 3, right? So, and if you read it like this vertically, you would see the complete functionality, right? Because the idea is to have all the horizontal lines for releases and to separate the functionality and to break it down by release, okay? And of course, we need to prioritize. But as I said, so release 1 most likely, having in mind that we need to maximize value, we're going to deliver the most important functionality or some essential functionality. Without that, the customer won't be able to use our system.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I have got one question here.
Yes,
So
go ahead.
now we are mapping these stories like based on the releases and based on the main functionality. So this question is related to the upper strip, which is having like user management, and they are having 3 boxes. So generally, like in a practical scenario, we map those stories to a epic. So for example, user management is one epic where we are mapping the all stories. So just want to ask, like, would it be a good idea to create a 3 epics like register, login, or this one, and map the stories to those, or just a idea to create a user management as a epic and then uh, create a labels like this is related to the register, login, or the update preferences? So
Okay, yeah, I'd say if you work in Jira or maybe Azure DevOps, it's a good idea to have this register, login, and update preference as epics and have some labels like this, right? So you'd have this user management label, you'd have book room label and change reservation label, and then you would have these epics with all of these user stories related to the particular epic. So to me, this approach seems valid. But again, if you'd like to have this user management as an epic and book room as an epic and change reservation as an epic, there would be, it would be a bit complicated because in this case, if you have user management as an epic, then register, login, and update preferences should be, should represent the user stories. And then you would have some, breakdown. So in this case, we can't say that these are, user stories, but rather some tasks related to the stories, which are register, login, and update preferences. Okay, and it's not that practical because when we double click on any of these tasks, right, we would see that, like that, create new user. And as we saw here, create new user. It's not good because it's unrefined. And when you start refinement of this, for example, of this particular user story, you would see that there's a lot of stuff going on within this particular card. Okay, and here we don't meet the good characteristics of the user story to be small. It's not small. It's a bit complicated, right? Because in this case, again, how do you then refine this register and login and update preferences? Okay, so it will be huge. It will be huge. So the best approach to me is to use it as a label, like user management and bookroom, etc. And then register, login, and update preference would be epics. Okay.
yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah, because my main reason behind the question was like, I mean, whether at what level like we should be having the epic. it should be at the higher level or the middle level, because at the low level, like we are having this stories, it should be well refined. But yeah, it's true that if we create a user management as Epic, then it will be more cumbersome, because there will be more to come, or more story needs to be attached to that Epic. But yeah, I got that point. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, no problem, no problem. Yeah, because in fact, when you create user management as an epic, it would be just, you know, an additional overhead to the team. It's not practical. That's it. So it's not practical nor easy. So yeah, the best way would be to register epics using these yellow cards. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this canvas, guys? Well, okay. If there's no question, let's finish our presentation. So yeah, as we saw, story mapping technique has its benefits, right? Because it allows us to focus on the value for the users, right? Then we are able to, you know, to define some clear requirements. It's easier to prioritize the work, right? So in the right order, as I just showed you that you see, so the work is prioritized. It's easy to read all these lines and so on, right? So if we use it constantly on, you know, on a constant basis, it allows us to deliver new value often and early, right? And as well, it allows us to find some dependencies. So the team would review the board, and they could easily identify some dependencies and risks talking to the product owner, right? And all of this will allow us to build team consensus. So what are the challenges when we work with story mapping, right? So no clear customer. This is very important, because if we don't have, you know, some particular stakeholders participating, and we don't have, you know, sometimes it could be just, you know, it's just for the department, could be the case. So, you know, the product is for the department. So we need to ask the question, what is the key user, right? So what are the key users that would use the application? So we need to identify our customer to be able to, you know, to manage all the user stories and epics properly. Also, if we don't have a clear problem to solve, this is also, well, you know, it's a problem. It's a complication that won't work good for the team. Because if we don't have a clear problem, how would we develop our product? So what would be the problem? So it's absolutely, well, you know, it's an absolute nonsense. So also limited utility and some rework and redundancy could also be the challenges that the team might face, and we need to manage it properly as well. Okay. Well, guys, that's it. That's it that I have. So I've got some links for you with some additional information on the user stories, deep, invest, spikes, and so on. So I'm going to upload the PDF of the presentation with all the clickable links to the Meetup website. So, and I'm going to paste a message there. So that's it from my part. And I'd like to know if you have any questions, or maybe you'd like to discuss some real world scenarios that you have that you struggle to resolve. So happy to help while we have some extra time.
Hi, Yury. Ishfaq here.
Hi there.
Hi. Just a quick question, Yury. Great presentation. Thank you so much. One of the issues that I have in my work is that the user stories, they end up becoming really long. Some of the team members start putting in loads of stuff that triggers and needs, acceptance criteria which are needed. Then they can become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. at what sort of level do you think, okay, you know what, that's a bit too big, and start splitting the story up?
Well, let's see. As far as it's okay for the team, as far as the user story is clear for the team, and it helps to, I'm not saying that, longer user story would affect negatively the team, but if it does, then you need to review how to make it a bit shorter, right? So there is no, let's say, there is no, a standard for the length of the user story, but you need to make sure that it's clear for the team. So is it clear for the team, or team complains that, it's not good for us and we have all these long user stories, we can't work properly on any of them? What's your situation, Ishfaq?
I think the it's such a big story, and then we start getting points of 8 points, start touching 13 points, and recently we've had some tickets go through where then we start seeing a lot of bugs coming through because the breadth of the ticket is so wide that we get multiple tickets all the way through that one ticket. Like one story brings out 7 bugs, for example. And we love bugs. We do sincerely love bugs, but it really slows down the progress. So I've been trying to advise my colleagues to chop the stories up to the smallest part that can be tested. Can we test a drop-down menu? That's a story. Can we test pagination? That's a story. Can we test just a search box for numbers? That's a story. So that's where I'm just now.
Yeah, so let's see, because it's interesting. So, and I have 2 questions for you. So first one, what are the metrics, most particularly some QA metrics that the team use? And how do you manage technical debt?
Yury, listen, you're touching a sore point when you speak about technical debt, mate. We're struggling with tech debt just now. Okay? I can't believe you went there, seriously. Regarding to metrics, though, with metrics, we measure a couple of things. We measure velocity with story points on a burn down, as well as our throughput in the number of tickets that we're completing in the particular sprint. And by technical debt, we are saving technical debt for a rainy day.
Yeah, well, that's it. Because in this case, if you have, as you mentioned, a big number of bugs coming up, working on the user stories could be related to some technical debt in place, right? So so most importantly, you need to see if the team manages the technical debt properly, because otherwise, it would be complicated in the future to work on the product because of these of the amount of technical debt. And after that, so I would say implement some QA metrics, the amount of bugs detected, the amount of defects detected in UAT, for example, and as well as in production environment, would also do the trick. So so you would have a better perspective of what's going on with your product. So and and regarding the length of the user stories, as I said, so if it's clear for the team, that's fine, because I don't think from what you said, right? So I don't have the whole information, but from what you said, it seems that that the problem is not only, at least not only the long user stories, but also something that is going on with the quality of the code.
Cheers, Yury. Good. Thanks, mate.
No problem. Guys, any other questions?
Nothing in the chat, Yury.
Let's
So
see.
I have also got one question. Okay. Yeah. So in one of the project, what I have observed that is like they raise the story, and let's say there are a couple of defects at the end of the sprint. So what they were doing, they were closing that story and they were raising a new story, and they were just to consume those points, and they were just linking those defects to those stories. So in a way, like it's a wrong because you will be having a lot of stories for the same thing, and
Mhm.
it will carry it over sprint by sprint if you are not able to close all the bugs. So in the practical scenario, would it be a good to carry over that story till all the bugs are closed so that like we have a single point of reference, or there can be any other approach where we can handle this type of situation in more better way?
Well, here it will depend on, so the stakeholders said that, we can't accept this story because of the amount of the bugs. Is it the case? Or it's just, so just the team detects the bugs and they keep working on it. So how do you manage it with the stakeholders, first of all?
So it depends on, I mean, what I observe there is like the
Hello?
Connectivity issue there. Can't hear them.
Yeah, I think so.
I've got. Well, while we wait for DJ to come back, got one here in the chat for you. Could you estimate spikes with story points? Okay. Oh, was that you?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Yes, the team should estimate their spikes in story points because this represents some amount of work that they are going to do during the sprint. So, and we can't just, we can't have this spike in place without estimating it, because the stakeholders or the product owner would ask a question like, okay, so we can't deliver this or that user story by the end of the sprint. So what happened? And you can say, okay, we were working on some spike, and he or she would say, okay, but how is that? So to document it properly, to document it properly, we need to estimate it, right? So we need to assign some points to that to reflect this work on the team level as well, to report to the stakeholders or product owner in case such questions are asked.
Yeah. Nothing else. Just a follow up from Liz, just to say that it's good to time box spikes.
Yeah, time box also could do the trick. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a nice one. Yeah. I know, Ajay. Are you back?
He's muted now, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we just lost you when you were talking about the, the particular situation within the team.
Okay, yeah, some technical glitch. Yeah, I mean, what I observed, the stakeholders were also agreed to have that approach. But at the end of, let's say, 5-6 sprints, you are having 4-5 stories for the same functionality.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's kind of a big project where we are having around 30-40 sprints, let's say. But when you are going with the release, then you are ending up having, let's say, 4-5 stories, and it's a bit difficult to backtrack them one by one. So from my point of view, I mean, we should not close that story until all the bugs, everything is closed, so that like we have a single point of reference. But in the practical scenario, everyone wants to claim the points for the reports, and also I want to understand that can be what can be suggested here, I mean, so that like things can be improved, considering that stakeholders maybe want to claim some points, or they want to close the story and something like that.
Yes, I got your point. So in this case, I'd say what you can try, so the team could close this story out and then just create new bugs related to the particular user story and work on these bugs. So estimate these bugs, and that's it. So I mean, if the development work is done and the let's say the main functionality has been accepted by the customers, right? No problem to close the story and create new bugs related to this story, and work on these bugs. So doing this, you would clean up all the reports, right? In case you need to deliver some reports, and you would track all the bugs until its complete resolution. So I'd say you could try doing that. So so in case you have the team or the stakeholders insist on closing the user story, no problem. But you need to create new bugs and have some link or have a way to show that these bugs are related to the particular user story. So I would do that.
Okay. And related to that, like for the bugs, generally we do not point the bugs. It's just like as a part of the story estimation. Uh, I mean, which I have observed. But yes, agree that if we just estimate that bug, then in that scenario, we'll be getting more clarity and will not be ending up creating multiple stories just to support
Yes,
that bus linking and all.
yes, that's
Yep.
it. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, guys, any other questions?
Yeah, hi, Pankri here. So
Yeah, hi.
going back to estimating spikes, like it's more of an investigation. So if you time box it and if it takes more time than that, so do you need to create another spike or maybe update the existing one?
Well, I would update the existing one, but it depends also on your situation, because I'd say, well, if you do it within the within one sprint, that's okay. If you say, well, it depends on how would you manage these spikes, because if you have some some spike that would involve a lot of investigation, I would say that the team. Well, it's an interesting one, because if you have a huge spike,
Yeah.
you would rather estimate it with some amount of points, and then just just have it visualized. Maybe in this case it would be a useful practice to have some to visualize these spikes and to separate the spikes from the rest of the work the team has. Like, say, I don't know what you manage, like Trello, Jira, or Azure DevOps, or any other platform. But I'd say, have a place, have a separate column maybe, where you have all these spikes, and follow up on these spikes from time to time, or on each sprint would be an interesting thing to try.
Yeah. Okay. Because they add up to the team's velocity. So if you keep on overestimating it, so the velocity will suffer then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks,
No problem.
Anna, for the comment.
Yeah, also interesting approach here, right? Estimate spikes and write the actual complexity once completed to get better feeling for the future. Yeah, good empirical stuff here, good empirical approach, because when you do that, right, so you have you learn more, and after that, for the future, you would have some better understanding of the complexity the spike would involve. Yeah, good one. Okay, guys, if there's no more questions, I think we can finish here. So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining and participating, and have a nice day. So cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Yury.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, folks.